What's happening, everybody? On today's show, we're going to give you our winners of the weekend from SEC Week 6. Also, who depressed us this week? We'll give you a hint. If you had a backup quarterback in this week, chances are your team did not fare very well. Locked On SEC starts right now.
Are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Remember, Locked On SEC is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube and at LockedOnSEC.com. Let's jump into it. Let's get to our winners of the weekend.
And now, your winners of the weekend.
Real winners win.
You know you're looking at a winner, 'cause I'm a winner, yeah, I'm a winner.
And our first winner of the weekend, we start with the Tennessee offense. I talked last week about how dangerous Hendon Hooker is and that passing game, even without Cedric Tillman in this game. But Josh Heupel and the Vols, they went into Baton Rouge and absolutely took it to LSU, winning 40-13 in a beatdown. But what stood out to me was how balanced the Vols were. Their running game, very impressive. Jabari Small getting 22 carries for 127 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Jalen Wright had 59 yards rushing. Hendon Hooker had 56 on the ground. Hooker threw for 239, but as a team, they rushed for 263. That's as balanced as you can get. Hooker connected on 2 touchdown passes to Jalen Hyatt. Brew McCoy stepped up big in this one. 7 catches, 140 yards to him. I was just so impressed. It was a very dominating performance by the Vols in a tough road environment. Their defense is really good, too. They helped make LSU one-dimensional, held them to just 55 yards rushing. It was a dominant win for the Vols as they improved to 5-0. And now they have a huge matchup hosting Alabama this weekend. College Game Day's already announced they're heading there. Yeah, they've already been to Knoxville once this year. They're going again. That's how big this game against Alabama is in a rivalry game that has been largely dominated by the Tide. But the Vols smell blood. Will they be able to pull off the upset? We'll talk more about that game throughout this week. Speaking of Alabama, our next winner of the weekend, I'm putting Jahmyr Gibbs in here. Continues to show, put on a show in Tuscaloosa. You knew they were going to have to lean on him with no Bryce Young. We saw Bryce Young in full pads. Looked like, maybe he was going to try to give it a go, but they ended up holding him out. Jalen Milroe got the start, and it was a mixed bag from him. Made some mistakes, fumbled the ball away, but it was Jahmyr Gibbs who helped Alabama get just what they needed. 21 carries, 154 yards, and Alabama's 24-20 win over A&M. Yes, they needed a goal line stand. We'll get to that a little bit later. The Aggies, over the Aggies, and Bama secures the win. But without Gibbs' rushing attack, this is a game Bama very well probably would have lost. The past 2 weeks, check out these numbers. Jahmyr Gibbs, past 2 weeks, 39 carries, 360 yards combined. Think he's not playing on another level right now? He now finds himself third in the SEC in rushing yards, behind just Rocket Sanders and Quinshon Judkins. For Alabama, it's their first time they've had multiple wins against unranked opponents by fewer than 5 points since 2008, Saban's second year in Tuscaloosa. So it depends on how you want to look at it. If you're an Alabama fan, a close win over Texas and Austin, and now a close win over A&M and Tuscaloosa, you could view it as the team is being tested, and they're passing that test while remaining undefeated. So maybe adding a couple of close games is good for character for Alabama. We'll see. Another winner of the weekend, how about Ole Miss's Jonathan Mingo? In a game where they found themselves trailing to Vanderbilt at halftime, the Ole Miss Rebels had to get away from their bread and butter a little bit, the run game, and they got to throwing the football with Jackson Dart, and his go-to target was the senior Jonathan Mingo. 9 catches, 247 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. Mingo doubled his entire season production in just this one game. He set an Ole Miss single-game receiving record, breaking Elijah Moore's record that he set in 2020 against Vandy. And Vanderbilt just had no answer for Mingo. 155 of those yards came after the catch. It was just his second 100-yard receiving game of the season. Also do need to give a shout-out to Jackson Dart. I've questioned his passing ability in recent weeks, and he answered the call. He did throw two interceptions, but he finished with 448 passing, 3 passing touchdowns. It was a much-needed big passing day that showed Ole Miss can win a game with their passing game if they need to, not just with the dominant run game they've had all year. Another winner of the weekend, I've got Florida DB Jaden Hill, 2 interceptions, including a pick six. The pick six of Brady Cook came in the first quarter to extend Florida's lead to 10-0, really set the tone for the day. His other interception coming in the second half. He also had 3 tackles as well. The Gator defense racked up 4 sacks on the day, very active and disruptive. It's worth noting this was only Jaden Hill's second game of the year. He just came back a week prior against Eastern Washington. He missed all of last season due to injury. Ventrell Miller, he also had a very nice day, 11 total tackles. But Jaden Hill, large amount of ACL injuries throughout his football career, even in high school. After the game, Billy Napier said he was the first person that we called up in front of the team. If we were giving out game balls, we would have gave one to him today. Jaden Hill, outstanding, and they needed that pick six to help Florida to the win over Mizzou. Another winner of the weekend, I'm putting Georgia's defense in here. Look, after a couple lackluster performances the prior 2 weeks against Kent State and Mizzou, the Bulldogs needed a get-right game, and that's what they got versus Auburn. The Bulldogs dominated Auburn, winning 42-10. They held Auburn under 100 yards rushing as a team. They held Robbie Ashford to 165 passing yards, 52 rushing yards. They kept Tank Bigsby in check, held him to just 10 carries for only 19 yards. Auburn was 5 for 17 on third downs. Georgia forced a couple of fumbles. And look, after they give up 22 points to Kent State and 22 points to Mizzou, they held Auburn to just 10. And Georgia improves to 6-0, 3-0 in the SEC, and the Deep South's oldest rivalry was just not a very competitive one. I thought, Auburn would be able to keep this close. They did in the first half. Georgia just ran away with it in the second half. I want to shout out Georgia's run game as well. Branson Robinson, 98 yards. Dejon Edwards, 83 yards. And how about Stetson Bennett showing off his wheels with a 64-yard run of his own, almost 300 rushing yards as a team for Georgia. And next up, they get a home game against Vandy. Another winner of the weekend, I put Will Rogers in here just about every week at Mississippi State, but it's because he just continues to have phenomenal days. 31 for 48 for 395 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. He continues to lead the SEC in passing yards with over 2,100 yards passing. Also leads the SEC with 22 passing touchdowns. The next closest to him is Bryce Young with 14. He's only got 3 picks on the year, only been sacked 8 total times. Will Rogers just having a phenomenal season, and he continued that with a win over Arkansas this weekend. The Bulldogs now 5-1 on the season. They've only had 2 better starts over the past 20 years. That was in 2012 and 2014 when they started 6-0. But also underrated, how about running back Dylan Johnson? 17 carries for 100 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. Also had 2 catches for 49 yards. But he's the first Mike Leach player to hit 100 rushing yards at Mississippi State. 4th time this season, Mississippi State has scored 40 or more points. And now back-to-back SEC wins for Mike Leach's crew and consecutive SEC wins by at least 17 points for the first time since 2018. They are rocking and rolling, man. If they just could have figured out how to win that game at LSU a few weeks ago, they'd be sitting here undefeated. And maybe something to think about for Alabama and some other teams down the stretch, including Ole Miss. Our last winner of the weekend, I've got Marshawn Lloyd over at South Carolina. It was a week where we had so many backup quarterbacks playing in this league. And South Carolina took advantage of Will Levis being out, Kaya Sharon making his first career start, unable to bring the big plays that Levis brings. But South Carolina did a good job playing ball control. Marshawn Lloyd, a great job running the ball, 22 carries for 110 yards and a rushing touchdown. Also had 2 catches for 31 yards. Marshawn Lloyd now 7th in the SEC in rushing yards, right behind Ole Miss's Zach Evans. And that's now 3 straight productive weeks for Lloyd in the rushing game. Think about this. He only had 75 rushing yards combined in his first 3 games. Now over his last 3 games, Marshawn Lloyd is combined for 359 rushing yards. Gamecocks are at their best when they're running the football effectively, and that's what they're doing right now. Quick shout out to a Carolina defense that racked up 6 sacks and helped Shane Beamer get his first win over a ranked opponent there at South Carolina. So a lot of congrats to go around there. Quick reminder, thank you guys again for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Those are who impressed in Week 6. How about who depressed us? We're going to get to that in just a second. But first, I want to remind you guys about our friends at SimpliSafe. Look, the numbers don't lie. In the last decade, over 4 million people have chosen SimpliSafe home security to protect their home. You don't earn the trust of that many people without doing something right. At SimpliSafe, your safety is the only thing that matters. We know because we use SimpliSafe. They protect you with cutting-edge security technology powered by 24/7 professional monitoring agents who always have your back. Here's why we love it. I mean, they're always available whenever you need it. Professional, always have your back, 24/7 monitoring agent, and their SimpliSafe tech support staff always there to help you out. They'll call you the moment a threat is detected and dispatch police or first responders in an emergency, even if you're not home or can't be reached. SimpliSafe blankets your home in protection with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door. Their monitoring experts use proprietary advanced response technology to visually confirm when a break-in is real. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes. Go to simplysafe.com/lockedoncollege. Save 20% on your SimpliSafe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month free. Again, visit simplysafe.com/lockedoncollege to learn more. There is no safe like SimpliSafe. Continue on here, Locked On SEC. All right, we gave you our winners of the weekend. Now it's time to get into who depressed in Week 6 of the SEC. And there was a lot of ugliness and blame to go around. So let's jump right into it. And I'm starting first and foremost with Jimbo Fisher's final play call. Look, on a night where Texas A&M was a 24-point underdog, the Aggies did a phenomenal job playing their butts off. The defense was lights out. They kept this one close and had a chance to win the game in the final seconds, trailing 24-20. Haynes King, under 2 minutes to play, takes the Aggies right down the field, connects with Evan Stewart. Moose Muhammad draws a flag for pass interference. That sets up for one play from the 2-yard line. 3 seconds remaining. Aggies call a play to Evan Stewart. Falls incomplete. Alabama holds on for the win, but a lot of criticism for the play call from Jimbo, which appeared to be a backside hitch at the goal line to the short side of the field. The pass was so high, it looked like even if Stewart had caught it, he may have just been shy of the goal line because he was hitching back. A lot of folks thought, hey, maybe you get Haynes King to roll out. Maybe you set up a run play or a screen play to Devon Achane, who's been, your best offensive player for much of the year. If anything, my opinion, I think it solidifies even more that Jimbo needs to hand over play calling duties to somebody else next year. It just felt like give your team a chance to win. You throw the ball over receiver out of bounds, you don't even get a chance to win there, man. Even if you just ran the ball, you get stuffed at the goal line. At least you have a chance the guy can fall forward and win the game. But just another blow for the Aggies, who started this season preseason number 6. They were hoping to compete for the SEC and play for a national championship, but that offense just has not lived up to the hype. They played better this week, and Haynes King, give him credit. With Max Johnson out, thought he stepped up to the plate, played very well. But now the Aggies are 3-3 overall, just 1-2 in the SEC. And next up is a road trip to South Carolina. It's just it's another rough go for Jimbo Fisher, and it's a lot of money he's making. Next up in our who depressed category, I've got Kentucky. Look, it's been a rough 2 weeks for the Wildcats. Just 2 weeks ago, they were 4-0 and ranked number 7 in the country. But since then, a heartbreaking late loss to Ole Miss. And then this past weekend, without Will Levis dealing with that turf toe, Kaya Sharon not able to do much with this offense as the Cats fell 24-14. Chris Rodriguez, he had 22 carries for 126 yards. It's his first 100-yard game of the year, but he fumbled on the opening drive. That led to points for South Carolina, and the Kentucky offensive line woes continue. They give up 6 sacks to South Carolina. Sharon threw an interception to David Spalding. They had a punt block. They missed a field goal. It's a rough day at the office all around for the Wildcats. They had some defensive breakdowns that allowed Spencer Rattler to get into a little bit of a rhythm. And that doesn't bode well because they've got a red-hot Mississippi State coming up next. So the Wildcats need to get Will Levis healthy and ready to go. And they find themselves in a shootout with the Bulldogs. Another depressed of the weekend. How about Arkansas going in a series of teams without their starting quarterback this past weekend? The Razorbacks were without KJ Jefferson. They said, they thought maybe he could go, but it's a game-time decision. Ultimately decided to hold him out. We saw both Cade Fortin and Malik Hornsby. Hornsby did show off his running ability, 114 rushing yards, but through 2 picks. Arkansas was 0 for 3 on 4th downs, trying to keep up with that Mississippi State offense as they fall 40-17. The Bulldogs put up almost 600 yards of offense on the Razorbacks and outdueled them with 33 first downs to just 18. The Hogs also had 10 penalties for 84 yards. They lost the time possession battle 36 minutes to 24. As bad as the defense has been for Arkansas, I do need to give a shout out to Bumper Pool. He did set a program record with 409 career tackles. But Arkansas has now lost 13 of their last 14 road games against ranked opponents. After starting the season 3-0, the Razorbacks are now back to 500 at 3-3. They've lost 3 in a row. And now they have 2 tough road trips coming up. A road trip out to BYU this weekend in a non-conference matchup, and then a road trip to Auburn. Always difficult place to play. Just saying things could get worse for Sam Pittman's crew before they get better. What's going on, Arkansas? Another depressed of the weekend. How about LSU? Tigers had shown grit in recent SEC wins, beating Mississippi State at home and then coming back to beat Auburn on the road. But LSU was just clearly unmatched against a super talented Tennessee team on Saturday morning in Death Valley. On the opening kickoff, LSU muffed the kick and gave the Vols a short field. If you blinked, it was 10-0 Tennessee, and they never looked back. We told you last week this was a game that LSU was going to need to throw the football and try to take advantage of a weaker Vols secondary, but Jaden Daniels just continues to look hesitant when it comes to pushing the ball down the field. Daniels was sacked 5 times, and LSU was 0 for 3 on 4th down attempts. And Daniels threw his first interception of the season in the final minutes of this one as the Vols rolled to a 40-13 beatdown. Tennessee did a good job of shutting down the LSU run game as well. They held them to just 55 yards on 28 rush attempts. That's 2 yards a carry. LSU, they just had issues. They lost 2 offensive linemen. Left tackle Will Campbell was out of this game due to dehydration that found him in the hospital. And left guard Garrett Dellinger, he left the game with an injury. If LSU's offensive line play does not improve, there will be more losses on this schedule. Next up, a road trip to the Swamp to play the Florida Gators. Another deep press of the weekend. I've got Auburn in here. Auburn just 258 yards of total offense against Georgia this past weekend. That's now 2 straight games that they've had less than 300 yards of offense. That's only the second time that's happened in the last decade. Auburn had a silly fake punt that didn't work that set up a Georgia touchdown drive. And Auburn has not scored more than 17 points in any of their last 4 games under Brian Harsin. Auburn snapped a streak of 2 straight games without a second half point. They got an Anders Carlson field goal in the third quarter, but the Tigers have been outscored 125-31 in the second half of their last 9 games against Power 5 teams. It's just a kind of a wait and see now mode. When does Brian Harsin get fired? Next up, it is a road trip to Ole Miss before their bye week. A lot of folks believe Auburn will use that bye week to move on and relieve him of his duties. But who will be the interim? Is it Zach Etheridge? Who do you make the interim head coach if you move on from Harsin? But the timing would seem right. Look, if they go up and put a valiant effort against Ole Miss, maybe they keep him. I don't know. We'll see. But if they go get blown out to Ole Miss, you got to think the axe is coming for Harsin very soon. Another deep press of the weekend. Not to be too hard on him, but Brady Cook, I thought, a week after playing very well against the Georgia defense, just made too many mistakes in this one, particularly those 2 interceptions with Jaden Hill. One of them was a pick 6. He was sacked 4 times. And he's just going through his growing pains as a young, first-time starting quarterback in the SEC. He's now thrown for just 1,200 passing yards on the season with just 5 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. And if you're a Mizzou fan, you're looking for moral victories. Yeah, your team is just 2-4 overall, but 3 straight losses have all been by 1 score or less. They lost by 3 at Auburn. They lost by 4 to Georgia. And this week they lost by 7 at Florida. Next up, a home game against Vandy after their bye week. And lastly, in our depressed category, look, he won the game, but I'm putting Anthony Richardson in here. It looked like Richardson was really starting to improve as a quarterback. He threw for over 400 yards in that Tennessee loss and threw for 240 yards last week against Eastern Washington. But this week, just 8 for 14 passing for only 66 passing yards for Richardson, 1 touchdown, 1 INT. He did have 5 carries for 45 yards. I just don't really know where we are with Anthony Richardson right now. I guess he didn't have to do much with the way that Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne were running the football. But still, that's 100 total yards of offense that Richardson had on Saturday in a 1-score win over Mizzou. Next up, LSU defense coordinator Matt House going to try to test Richardson's passing ability, you have to think, and pressure him. But on the season, Anthony Richardson just 1,100 passing yards, 5 touchdowns to 7 interceptions passing. Not all that great. All right, thank you guys again for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we'll take a look at the latest AP poll and where the SEC teams rank in that one. But first, I want to remind you about our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for football betting throughout the season. I get all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on just about every game. And as always, BetOnline, your continued source for all your sports wagering information. They got live betting, up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. Head on over to betonline.net. You can do so on your mobile device to learn more. They're going to have all the SEC games going up there for you this weekend, as we'll give you those lines throughout the week. Go check them out right now. Bookmark them in your phone. It is BetOnline, and it is where the game starts. All right, roll on here, Locked On SEC, and we got to update you on the latest AP poll because there's been some movement up top once again as we jump into it. Georgia took back the number 1 spot in the AP college football poll from Alabama, being bumped out last week by the Crimson Tide, who slid to number 3. The Bulldogs received 32 first-place votes, 1,535 points in the top 25 to easily reclaim the number 1 spot. They were just 2 points behind Alabama at number 2 last week. So Georgia thumps Auburn. They're the number 1 team. Ohio State moves up a spot to number 2. They got 20 first-place votes. And Alabama falls to number 3. That is a season-low ranking for Alabama, who is the preseason number 1. Fell to number 2 after they struggled with Texas in week 2. Tide did receive 11 first-place votes this week, but that's how the top 3 shapes up. Georgia 1, Ohio State 2, Alabama 3. Clemson comes in at 4, Michigan number 5. Tennessee coming in at number 6 after that big win at LSU. So that sets the stage for, if you're going by the AP poll, number 3 Alabama at number 6 Tennessee this weekend. As we mentioned, College Game Day will be there, so that's big. Ole Miss hanging tough in the top 10. They are at number 9 in the AP poll. Mississippi State climbing back up in the rankings. Remember, they were unranked just a couple weeks ago. Now they're in the rankings and continue to move up. Number 16 in the latest AP poll. And the only other SEC team hanging in there, it's Kentucky hanging tough at 23 after their home loss to South Carolina this past weekend. So, like I said, Tennessee moves up to number 6, the best ranking for the undefeated Vols since number 5 early in the 2005 season. That's how far back you got to go back to the Fulmer days where Tennessee's been ranked, was previously ranked this high. They stumbled to a 5-6 and unranked finish later that season, though. So that's when things started to go sideways. But USC, they fell 1 spot to number 7 ahead of Oklahoma State. And like we said, Ole Miss coming in at number 9, Penn State rounding out the top 10. Texas back into the top 25 after their beatdown of Oklahoma this past weekend. Both those teams were unranked, but such a convincing beatdown. The Longhorns find their way back in at number 22. Future SEC school there for you in the top 25. But again, just to recap, Georgia number 1, Alabama number 3, Tennessee number 6, Ole Miss number 9. Mississippi State number 16, and Kentucky number 23. Obviously, LSU fell out of the rankings where they were. Arkansas has been out for a little bit, and that's where we are. So we'll keep you up to date on all the latest movement in the polls, but congrats to all those teams that are ranked there. And obviously another big week coming up here in week 7 of the SEC. And we'll preview a lot of the games happening this weekend. Like we talked about, Kentucky with a big game against Mississippi State, LSU and Florida, big game for both of those programs. And, what's year one like for Brian Kelly? What's year one like for Billy Napier? It's a big game for both of them. Of course, Georgia gets Vandy. Ole Miss and Auburn is an interesting one. Arkansas, of course, trying to snap their losing streak, going out to BYU. And again, Rocky Top is going to have the center of all our attention this weekend with Alabama and Tennessee. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. I am Chris Gordy. Talk to you guys tomorrow. We got some great guests coming up this week you do not want to miss, particularly if you're a Georgia Gator fan or a Florida Gator fan, or just a fan of the SEC back in the 90s. We're going to have Danny Werfel is going to join our show. He's got a great charity event coming up that we'll tell you about later this week. So you don't want to miss that. And also some other special guests dropping in as well. So make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube page where you can get the video version of this show. And make sure you subscribe to the podcast version. We're here for you 5 days a week talking all things SEC football. Again, I'm Chris Gordy. Thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Now you go make your second listen. Check out some of our other great podcasts on the Locked On Podcast Network covering your team every day. We got Locked On LSU, Locked On Vols. We got Locked On Gators. Just about every school that you're looking for in the SEC, we've got you covered. I'm Chris Gordy. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow right here on Locked On SEC.